You really think it's still out there?
Lena's voice was barely a whisper, her breath coming out in clouds as she looked out over the dark, mist-covered valley below. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of something sweet but unfamiliar. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't," answered Jack, his tone steady, though his eyes reflected the unease that he refused to voice. The forest stretched endlessly before them, ancient and thick, its depths filled with stories neither of them had ever fully believed. Until now. Lena's fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. "But we were told it was a myth, just a story to keep people out." Jack smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Myths have a funny way of becoming true when you're in the right place at the right time. There was silence between them for a moment. Only the whisper of the wind seemed to understand what they were really asking. Asterisk, was it worth it? Asterisk. Lena's heart beat faster, her feet shifting nervously on the forest floor. She knew what she had signed up for. An adventure, sure, but now that they were so close, doubt began to creep in. "What if we don't find it?" she asked, looking over at Jack. "What if it's not real? What if—" Jack turned to her, his expression serious but filled with a strange warmth. "What if we do find it? What if there's magic in the world we never even knew existed?" Lena exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. "Then we'll be the first to see it," she said, her voice almost a breath of awe. "And we'll be the ones telling the story." The smile Jack gave her was almost imperceptible, but it was enough to make her feel the truth of his words. Something was out there, and whether it was magic, mystery, or something else entirely, it was waiting for them. All they had to do was find it. They continued their trek through the dense forest, each step taking them deeper into the unknown. The trees loomed taller, their bark shimmering with an odd iridescence, as though the forest itself were alive, watching, waiting. The path they walked on grew more treacherous, winding through thick underbrush and jagged rocks, but neither of them hesitated. The further they went, the stranger the world around them became. A sudden shimmer in the air caught Lena's eye, like a glimmer of light dancing just at the edge of her vision. She stopped, her pulse quickening. "Did you see that?" Jack stopped beside her, scanning the surroundings. "See what?" Lena's eyes darted around, her instincts tingling. It was like light, but not from the sun. Jack raised an eyebrow, his voice dropping lower. "You think the stories are true?" Before Lena could answer, a low rumble echoed from deep within the forest, vibrating the air around them. A strange, haunting sound, a mix of wind and voices carried through the trees. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. Jack's hand found hers, his grip firm. "Let's keep moving," he said, but even his voice carried a hint of doubt now. They pressed forward, every step a little heavier, a little slower, as the forest grew even more oppressive. The trees bent unnaturally, their branches twisting into shapes that resembled creatures. Eyes, faces, figures, staring down at them. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, following them, but every time she turned, there was nothing, just the ancient, silent presence of the woods. After what felt like hours, the path opened up into a small clearing. In the center, an ancient stone archway stood, its surface covered in ivy and moss. The stones themselves were impossibly smooth, their edges curved as though they had been worn by time itself. Lena felt her breath catch in her throat. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the entrance." Jack stood beside her, his gaze lingering on the archway. The wind picked up again, swirling around them like it was alive, tugging at their clothes. He reached out a hand, hesitating for only a moment before he placed it on the stone. A soft hum filled the air, the ground beneath them trembling slightly, as though the earth itself had come alive. The stones of the archway shimmered for a brief moment, glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. "This is real," Lena breathed. "This is really happening." Jack nodded, his face pale. "And once we cross, there's no going back." But before either of them could say more, a voice, deep and echoing, spoke from within the archway. "Welcome, travelers. You seek the heart of the forest, do you not?" Lena spun around, but there was no one there. The voice continued, soft but certain. "You are not the first to seek it, nor will you be the last. But beware, the forest does not give up its secrets easily." Jack's voice was low as he spoke, more to himself than anything else. "We've come too far to turn back now." Lena's hand gripped Jack's arm as they both stepped closer to the archway, the humming sound growing louder. The air around them was thick with magic, thick with something ancient, something that had waited long to be discovered. They stepped through, and the world shifted. As they stepped through the archway, the world around them seemed to stretch and bend, like the very fabric of reality was warping. Lena's breath caught in her throat as the trees behind them faded away into a shimmering mist. The forest was no longer the same. It was quieter, darker, yet full of energy. The ground beneath their feet was soft, like stepping on velvet, and the air tasted sweet, like the first breath of spring. The trees here were taller, their trunks wider, their bark smooth as marble. The branches, draped with thick vines, hung low, casting long shadows that seemed to sway even when the wind wasn't blowing. It was as though the forest itself was alive, breathing, waiting. Lena looked over at Jack, her eyes wide with awe. Is this what we came for?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He was too busy scanning their surroundings, taking it all in. His face was a mixture of wonder and caution. "I don't know, but it feels like something is here, something we were meant to find." The hum from the archway had stopped, replaced by a strange silence. For a moment, all they could hear was the soft rustling of the vines and the occasional drip of water from above. It was as though the world had gone still, waiting. Then, without warning, a figure appeared before them. It was tall and graceful, cloaked in flowing robes made of what looked like woven silver threads. Its face was obscured by a hood, but its presence was undeniable. The air seemed to shift with the figure's movements, as though the very atmosphere bent to its will. Jack instinctively stepped back, pulling Lena with him. His heart raced, but he stood his ground, refusing to be intimidated. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head slightly, as if studying them. Its voice was soft, melodic, yet ancient, as if it had not spoken to humans in a long, long time. "I am the guardian of the heart of the forest. You have entered a place not meant for wanderers. What is it that you seek?" Lena's pulse quickened. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the very reason they had come. She looked up at the guardian, her voice steady but filled with awe. "We seek the heart of the forest, the magic that lies hidden here." The guardian regarded her with silent eyes for a long moment. Then it stepped forward, its movements fluid and graceful. "You believe the heart holds magic, but the magic you seek is not what it appears to be." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" The guardian's voice dropped to a whisper, as if sharing a secret. "The heart of the forest does not grant power or riches, as many believe. It grants knowledge, knowledge that can change the very course of your life. But be warned, once you know, there is no going back." Lena and Jack exchanged a glance. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, as though the weight of the guardian's words had settled upon them. "What kind of knowledge?" Jack asked, his voice low but curious. The guardian took a step back, its eyes locking with theirs. "The knowledge of the past, the forgotten truths of this world, the things that have been lost to time, but also the knowledge of the future, the paths you are yet to walk, the choices you have yet to make." Lena's mind raced. Could it be true? Could the heart of the forest really offer such power? She took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. "And what happens if we take that knowledge?" The guardian's eyes softened. "You will be forever changed. The path before you will never be the same. The magic will take root in your soul, and you will carry it with you for the rest of your life." Lena looked at Jack, searching his face for any sign of hesitation, but there was none. His expression was one of determination. "Let's do it," he said, his voice unwavering. The guardian nodded, as though expecting no less. "Then you must enter the temple. It is there that the heart resides." Without another word, the guardian turned and began walking through the dense forest, its robes trailing behind it like liquid silver. Lena and Jack followed, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to shift. The trees grew closer together, their branches intertwining, forming a canopy that blocked out the sky. The air grew cooler, and the soft, melodic hum of the forest returned, this time more pronounced, as though the very earth was singing a song of welcome. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing, and before them stood a structure unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a temple, though not of stone or mortar, but of living wood. The branches of the trees twisted together to form a grand archway. The walls of the temple pulsed with light, as though the very heart of the forest was contained within. Lena's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the heart of the forest. The guardian stepped aside, gesturing toward the temple. "Enter. The heart awaits you." With a glance between them, Lena and Jack took a step forward, entering the temple. The moment they crossed the threshold, the world seemed to shift again, the air thick with energy. The walls of the temple shimmered with a soft, golden light, and in the center of the room, floating above an altar of stone, was a glowing orb, radiating warmth and power. The heart of the forest. Lena's hand reached out, almost without thinking, her fingers brushing the orb. As soon as she touched it, a flood of images rushed into her mind, visions of distant lands, of ancient battles, of moments that had shaped the world. She saw the past, the present, and the future all at once, each memory, each vision, more vivid than the last. But then, a voice broke through the chaos. It was the guardian, speaking in a tone that was both gentle and firm. Remember, once you take the knowledge, it cannot be undone. The path you choose now will shape your destiny. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to make sense of the flood of information pouring into her mind. She turned to Jack, her voice trembling. "Do you feel it? This knowledge? It's overwhelming." Jack nodded, his face pale, but his eyes were steady. "I know, but we have to choose. We have to decide if we're ready." Lena closed her eyes, focusing on the heartbeat of the forest around them. It was soft, rhythmic, like the pulse of life itself. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The choice was theirs. And so, with a steady hand, Lena made her decision. She reached out again, touching the orb, and allowed the knowledge to fill her soul. The forest seemed to hum in response, as if recognizing the choice they had made. The air around them shimmered, the golden light intensifying, and then everything went silent. Lena's eyes fluttered open, though she wasn't sure when she had closed them. The rush of knowledge, the visions, the past, the future, had left her breathless, almost as though her body couldn't handle the weight of everything she now knew. But there was something else now, a shift. The air felt heavier, charged with energy, as though the very space around them had transformed. She could still feel the pulse of the forest, but it was quieter now, more distant. "Jack," Lena whispered, her voice hoarse. She turned toward him, expecting to see the same look of awe, of wonder, that had been on his face before. Instead, she saw something different, something darker. Jack's eyes were wide, but there was no fear in them, just a deep, unshakable resolve. He looked at Lena, and for a moment, it was as if he could see through her, as though his mind had traveled into places where hers couldn't follow. "You know what this means, right?" His voice was low, almost a murmur, but it carried an intensity that made Lena shiver. She frowned, her brow furrowing as she tried to shake off the dizzying flood of thoughts. "What do you mean?" Jack didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, his hand brushing against the orb that still hovered above the stone altar. The moment his fingers made contact, a soft, harmonic sound filled the temple, the vibration seeming to resonate deep within Lena's chest. "It's not just knowledge, Lena," Jack said. His eyes locked onto the orb, as though it were speaking to him. "It's a power, a responsibility. We didn't just learn something, we were chosen." Lena's heart raced. Chosen? Chosen for what? Jack turned slowly to face her, his expression grave. To protect it. The forest, the magic, it's all connected. We're part of it now, whether we like it or not. This knowledge, it doesn't just change us. It's calling us to something bigger. Lena's breath caught in her throat. The weight of his words settled over her like a dark cloud, thick and heavy. She felt it too, the magic, the pull of the forest. She had always known that this journey was about something more than just curiosity. But this felt like destiny. The silence between them stretched on, heavy and thick. Neither of them spoke for a long time, lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Lena broke the silence. "But what do we do now?" Jack didn't immediately answer. Instead, he turned toward the guardian, who had remained standing in the shadows, watching them silently. The figure's face was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in its eyes, something that Lena couldn't quite place. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" Jack asked, his voice demanding an answer. The guardian stepped forward, its robes rustling softly as it moved. "I knew the heart would reveal itself to you, but I did not know how you would respond. You have seen what lies ahead. You have felt the magic's call. But what does it want from us?" Lena asked, her voice trembling. "What does it want us to do?" The guardian regarded them both for a long moment. Its eyes, hidden beneath the shadow of its hood, seemed to pierce through to their very souls. "The forest is a living entity. It needs protectors, those who can carry its magic and ensure its survival. The heart you have touched is not just a source of power. It is the pulse of the world itself, and you have been chosen to guard it." Lena took a step back, her hand instinctively reaching for Jack's. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process the enormity of what the guardian was saying. "But we didn't ask for this. We just came to learn, to understand." The guardian's voice softened, becoming almost comforting. "I understand, but the heart does not choose those who seek it. It chooses those who are ready. You have seen the truth, and now you must decide. Will you accept this responsibility, or will you turn away from it?" Lena and Jack exchanged a look. In that moment, everything they had ever known, everything they had ever wanted, seemed insignificant compared to the weight of the decision before them. Lena closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "We don't have a choice, do we?" Jack gave a small, grim smile. "No, I don't think we do." With that, the decision was made. They had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. The magic of the forest had claimed them, and now they were bound to it in ways they couldn't yet fully understand. "Then we'll protect it," Lena said, her voice steady. "We'll do whatever it takes." The guardian nodded, its expression unreadable beneath its hood. "The path ahead will not be easy. The forest will test you, challenge you in ways you cannot imagine. But know this, you are never alone. The forest will guide you, as long as you remain true to its heart." With that, the guardian turned and began to walk toward the temple's exit, its robes flowing like liquid silver. Lena and Jack followed closely behind, knowing that this journey was far from over. It had only just begun. As they stepped back into the forest, the trees seemed to part, as if clearing the way for them. The air felt lighter now, less oppressive, though the weight of their new responsibility still hung heavy on their shoulders. "Where do we go from here?" Lena asked, her voice a mix of wonder and fear. Jack paused for a moment, looking out at the forest ahead of them. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out together." And with that, they began to walk, their steps in sync as they moved forward into the unknown, the pulse of the forest guiding them. The path ahead was unclear, as though the very forest was testing their resolve. With each step Lena and Jack took, the air seemed to thicken, the sounds of the trees around them growing louder, almost as though they were whispering in a language they could not understand. Jack walked ahead, his gaze scanning the horizon, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The weight of the guardian's words had settled deeply in his mind. The forest will challenge you in ways you cannot imagine. He had thought he understood the forest, the trees, the wind, the faint rustling of leaves that always seemed to tell a story. But now, It felt as though everything was shifting, morphing into something far beyond what they had known. "Lena, stay close," Jack called back, his voice sharp with caution. She had drifted into her thoughts, but his words snapped her back to the present. Lena nodded, though a strange pull in the back of her mind made her glance over her shoulder. It felt as though the forest was watching them, its gaze penetrating and heavy. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack turned, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Lena hesitated, unsure how to describe the sensation. "It's like something's waiting for us, watching us." For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the stillness of the forest settling in around them. Then, from the shadows, a low growl echoed through the trees. Jack stiffened, his hand instinctively moving toward the dagger at his side. "Get ready," he muttered under his breath. Lena's heart raced, her pulse quickening as the growl grew louder, closer. "What is that?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "I don't know," Jack replied, his eyes scanning the darkened woods for any movement. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." The trees seemed to part just then, and from the shadows emerged a figure, large, shadowed, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Its silhouette was almost human but distorted, its features stretched and twisted in ways that made Lena's blood run cold. The figure took a step forward, and the growl grew louder. A creature, dark and ancient, its eyes locked onto Lena and Jack, as if recognizing them. "I told you," the Guardian's voice echoed in the back of Lena's mind. "The forest will test you." Without thinking, Lena stepped back, but Jack held his ground, his hand still resting on the dagger. "Stay calm, Lena. Whatever this is, we can handle it. We have to." The creature took another step forward, its massive form now fully visible in the moonlight. Its fur was matted and black, its eyes an unnatural shade of green, glowing like fireflies. It sniffed the air, its gaze shifting between Jack and Lena. "Who are you?" Lena managed to ask, her voice trembling, but her curiosity still pushing her forward. The creature growled, its voice like gravel scraping against stone. "I am the Watcher, the guardian of the forest's deepest secrets." The words sent a shiver down Lena's spine. Guardian? Could it be another part of the forest's magic? Another test? "What do you want with us?" Jack demanded, his hand now firmly on the hilt of his dagger. "We don't want trouble. We're just trying to understand." The Watcher's eyes flashed, its expression shifting into something almost amused. "Understand? You think you can understand what lies beyond the veil of this world?" The creature took another step forward, its voice low and mocking. "You are so naive." Lena felt the pull again, the strange tug at the back of her mind that seemed to beckon her closer to the creature, as though it wanted her to listen, to understand. "What do you know of the heart?" she asked before she could stop herself. The words felt strange coming from her lips, but somehow they felt right. The Watcher's eyes narrowed, the amusement vanishing as quickly as it had come. "The heart? You are fools to seek it. It is not meant for your kind. Then why did it choose us?" Jack asked, his voice more forceful now, a mixture of frustration and determination. "Why did it choose us to protect it?" The creature's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, Lena saw something akin to respect in its gaze. You do not yet know the cost of what you've accepted, the watcher said, its voice quieter now. The forest is not a simple thing. It has a will, a desire to survive. But not all paths lead to salvation. Lena felt a chill in the air, and she stepped closer to Jack. What do you mean? The watcher's lips twisted into a dark smile, one that made Lena's skin crawl. The forest has its own balance. If you are to protect it, you will have to make sacrifices. It will not be an easy path, and those who fail will be lost forever. Jack stepped forward, his hand still on the dagger, but his gaze focused on the watcher. We will do whatever it takes. We can't turn back now. The watcher's smile faltered for just a moment before it gave a low, rumbling chuckle. Very well, then you will face what is to come. But be warned, the trials ahead will be your undoing if you are not careful. With that, the watcher turned and melted back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The forest fell silent again, the sense of danger hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Lena and Jack stood in stunned silence for a long while, trying to process everything that had just happened. What now? Lena asked, her voice barely audible. Jack took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the darkness. Now we keep moving. We can't turn back. We've accepted this responsibility, and now we have to see it through. Lena nodded, though a sense of unease lingered in her chest. The watcher's words echoed in her mind. The trials ahead will be your undoing. But they had no choice. They had come too far to turn back now. And so, they continued forward, deeper into the forest, unsure of what lay ahead, but certain that their journey had only just begun. The path before Lena and Jack became even more treacherous with each step. The forest, once lush and vibrant, now seemed dark and foreboding. The trees grew denser, their branches curling in twisted, unnatural shapes. The wind howled through the canopy, carrying with it whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs that sent a shiver down their spines. Lena kept her hand close to Jack's, the warmth of his grasp the only comfort in the heavy, oppressive silence that surrounded them. Her thoughts swirled, bouncing between the strange words of the watcher and the inexplicable pull that had drawn her into this journey. She had always felt an unexplainable connection to nature, to the trees and the wild places of the world. But now everything felt different. The forest wasn't the sanctuary it once was. It was a challenge, a riddle that needed solving. Jack, on the other hand, seemed determined to keep moving forward. His eyes, always vigilant, scanned the shadows with a mixture of fear and resolve. "We need to find the heart," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the wind. "We've come this far. We can't afford to fail now." Lena nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her chest. The watcher's words echoed like an ominous cloud, blocking out the light. "The trials ahead will be your undoing." "You're right," she said, trying to shake off the unease. "We can't stop now, but I can't help but feel like we're walking into something we don't fully understand." Jack stopped, his hand tightening around hers. "We never truly understand anything, Lena, but we can choose to face it head-on. That's all we can do." For a moment, their eyes locked, and Lena saw the raw determination in Jack's face. He had always been the more grounded of the two, the one who could push through doubt and fear. But even he seemed to be struggling with the weight of their journey. They continued on, the trees growing closer together until the space between them became narrow and twisted. The air grew heavier, the temperature dropping as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught their attention. A figure darted between the trees, too fast for them to see clearly. But the silhouette was unmistakable, a person or something like a person. Lena's heart raced. "Did you see that?" she whispered, tugging on Jack's sleeve. "Something's out there." Jack's eyes narrowed, and he instinctively reached for his dagger. "Stay close," he warned. They moved forward cautiously, every sound in the forest amplified in the stillness. The wind rustled through the leaves, the only noise besides their own footsteps. They came to a clearing, the trees parting to reveal a large, ancient stone structure. It looked out of place, an old, crumbling temple, half covered in ivy and moss. Its stone steps were worn, the walls etched with symbols Lena didn't recognize. "This is it," Jack said, his voice low with awe. "The heart must be inside." Lena hesitated, her hand on the stone. Felt cold to the touch, colder than it should have been. She glanced up at the temple's entrance, where the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, as though something inside was waiting for them. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What if we're not ready?" Jack met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "We have to be ready. We don't have a choice." Taking a deep breath, they stepped through the entrance, the darkness of the temple swallowing them whole. Inside, the air was thick with dust and age. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, depicting strange scenes of creatures and forces beyond their understanding. In the center of the room, a large stone pedestal stood, bathed in an ethereal, soft glow. As they approached the pedestal, Lena felt it again, the pull. This time, it was stronger, more insistent. She felt the forest, the earth, and something deeper within her stir, as though everything around her was awakening to their presence. Jack reached out, his fingers brushing the surface of the pedestal. "This is it," he murmured, "the heart of the forest." The glow around the pedestal intensified, and the temperature in the room seemed to rise. The stone beneath their feet trembled, as if in response to their touch. Then, the ground beneath them began to crack, and with a deafening roar, the entire temple shook. Lena staggered back, her heart racing. "What's happening?" she shouted over the noise. Jack grabbed her hand, pulling her away from the pedestal. "We've triggered something," he said, his voice urgent. "We need to get out of here." But it was too late. From the cracks in the stone floor, dark tendrils of smoke began to rise. They twisted and writhed like living things, swirling around the room with unnatural speed. The temple itself seemed to groan, the walls buckling and bending as the ground shook violently beneath them. Lena's eyes widened in terror as the tendrils reached out, their dark forms lashing toward them. "Jack!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the chaos. The smoke encircled them, and Lena felt herself being pulled toward the pedestal, her feet no longer touching the ground. It was as though the very force of the forest was fighting back, pushing them away, but at the same time, pulling them closer to the heart. Jack struggled against the force, his grip on her tightening as he fought to keep them together. "Lena, we have to hold on." But the force was too strong. Lena's vision blurred as the smoke enveloped her, and for a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing before her. A figure bathed in light, eyes glowing like fireflies. It was the Watcher, its form solidifying before her in the darkness. "You have awakened it," the Watcher's voice echoed through her mind, calm and unsettling all at once. "Now you will face the consequences of your choices." The smoke pressed in from all sides, and Lena's breath caught in her throat. She was no longer sure where the forest ended and she began. Her body caught between two worlds, between the living and the ancient powers that had been awakened. As the smoke swirled around her, she closed her eyes, bracing herself for whatever came next. Lena's heart hammered in her chest as the world around her blurred. She felt as though she were floating, her body weightless and disconnected from reality. The smoke tightened around her, pressing into her skin like 1,000 cold hands. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and she reached out, trying to hold on to something, anything. But there was nothing. Then the figure appeared again, the Watcher. It was not like before. This time it was clear, its features more defined, its presence undeniable. It hovered in the mist before her, its eyes glowing like twin moons. The Watcher's voice was soft, but the words seemed to reverberate within her mind. "You awakened the heart of the forest," it said, its tone both accusatory and knowing. "Now you must understand the cost." Lena struggled to speak, to move, but it was as though her very will was being suppressed. The Watcher's voice continued to echo through the haze of smoke, its presence both alien and comforting at once. "The forest is a living thing," it continued. "A pulse runs through it, through every tree, every stone, every creature. And that pulse, that heart, is not something to be taken lightly. It is not merely a source of power. It is a force of nature, a force beyond your understanding." The ground beneath Lena's feet trembled, and the air grew heavy, as if the entire forest were holding its breath. She wanted to speak, to ask why, to demand answers, but the words felt trapped in her throat. "You must learn," the Watcher said, its voice gentler now. "You must learn what it means to hold the heart of the forest. Only then will you know whether you are worthy of its power." The mist swirled, and suddenly, Lena was no longer alone. Jack stood beside her, his face drawn and pale, his eyes wide with fear. He reached for her, his hand warm against her cold skin. "Lena, are you all right?" His voice broke through the haze, pulling her back to the present. She felt the weight of his hand on hers, grounding her in this chaotic moment. I'm here," she whispered, though her voice felt distant, as though it belonged to someone else. "Jack, we have to do something." The Watcher's eyes flickered with a strange, knowing light. "You are not alone in this," it said. "The forest has chosen you both." Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Chosen?" she repeated. "What do you mean?" The Watcher tilted its head, as if considering how best to explain. "The forest's heart calls out to those who are worthy," it explained. "Those who can hear its pulse. It calls to them, offering a chance to learn, to grow, to protect. But it also tests them. It tests your resolve, your loyalty, your ability to wield its power without destroying what you hold dear." Lena's thoughts raced. She had always felt an affinity for the wild places of the world, a connection to the trees and the earth beneath her feet. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Jack stood by her side, his presence unwavering. "What do we have to do?" he asked, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying his own doubts. The watcher's gaze softened. "The heart will show you the way, but you must be ready to listen, to truly listen to its call." With that, the mist began to lift, and the ground beneath them settled. The forest, once so oppressive, now felt alive in a different way. The trees seemed to sway with the breeze, their leaves rustling like whispers of a forgotten language. The air was clearer, and the once overbearing weight lifted from their shoulders. Lena took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the forest beneath her skin. It was subtle, like the rhythm of her own heartbeat, but it was there. The connection was undeniable. The heart of the forest had chosen them, but it was not a gift. It was a responsibility. The watcher slowly faded into the mist, its eyes the last thing to disappear. "Good luck," it said, its voice barely a whisper in the wind. Lena stood still, her heart still racing, but she felt different, stronger, more attuned to the world around her. The heart of the forest was alive inside her now, and she had a duty to protect it. Jack squeezed her hand. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice full of quiet determination. Lena nodded, a slow smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Ready as I'll ever be." Together, they turned toward the heart of the forest, knowing that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But they were no longer afraid. They understood now that they were part of something greater than themselves, a force that bound the earth and all its creatures together. The forest's heart beat with them, and in that rhythm, they found their purpose. The end. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you have any thoughts, feedback, or ideas for future stories, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the soothing background music for a while. Wishing you a peaceful night. Take care, and sweet dreams.